Eat the rich. I originally this idea was percolating in my mind mostly because of that meme that gets shared that's like the people who are responsible for climate change are real people and they have names and addresses. Now, not necessarily jumping that far into that kind of specificity, but it does seem to me that a lot of times on the left, when we're talking about things, because we're approaching them from a structural point of view, we lose track of the specificity of it, right? So, like, we know that there's a ruling class, or a 1%, or whatever word you want to give it, and we know that these people are bad. We know that they're responsible for these things. They're at the heads of these giant structures and corporations that are doing all of the bad things we don't like. But it becomes a bit abstracted, right, in terms of especially personal anger, right? You get so, like, fucking mad, and it can kind of turn to nihilism because you just feel like, oh, what can I do? Like, how do I get mad at an idea? That's another problem in terms of recruitment, I would say, on a broad level to the left, is because the right-wing structural critique doesn't exist. They just get mad at people, and that's a lot easier to rile people up about it. You just blame so-and-so or whatever. And so for that reason, of course, we try to avoid that. But at the same time, like that meme says, these are real people, and any surface level investigation into any of them proves that they're absolute fucking weirdo psychopaths.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are no billionaires without exploitation. And the purpose of this podcast is to give people context for the zero-sum game worldview that the rich and the world's elite have. The global financial system is not as complicated as they want you to believe. And it is as simple as one person keeping the money that the poor produce for them, or the working class produce for them. And our current form of political economy that has spread to be the dominant political economy system of the world is just another iteration of master, slave, and lord and serf, and now as employer and employee.
Yeah, it's also, again, in that, it's like, the people who are in charge now, like, because I think a lot of the capitalist mythos that can fool a lot of people, and certainly I still have ingrained in me in some weird level, is that whole thing about, like, hard work, right? And the kind of entrepreneurial spirit, and they're the jobs creators and stuff. But particularly at this moment in time, like, that might have been true in the past or whatever, when all of these systems were first being built and these people were building their industrial empires and stuff. But particularly now, when we talk about the 1%, we're not even talking about, like, the managers of production or the managers of the service industry. We're talking about, like, a relatively small group of people who are just living off the dividends of their shitty ancestors.
Exactly.
Residual slave wealth.
And they live in such weird decadence. It's like a totally different world. Communism already exists. It's just for a small amount of people.
Right, yeah. And I think what you were just saying about how they all live in this sort of weird little bubble, I think that's important to remember in the context of that crosses international borders. You know what I mean? Like, a fucking billionaire in the United States has way more in common and mutual class interests with a fucking billionaire in China or a billionaire in Russia or a billionaire in Europe or wherever. You know what I mean? They have more in common. They have more shared interests than with them than they do with any other single American.
By the way, in case anybody forgot, in 2011, the Panama Papers happened, and it proved, literally contractually, that there is a global conspiracy to evade taxes and to give as little back of the money that we've created for these ruling class people, politicians and billionaires and oligarchs, as little back as possible. Literally, hoarding wealth was not enough for them. They wanted to have zero of it go back to help uphold the infrastructure, both labor and literal physical infrastructure, that enabled them to hoard that amount of wealth. As an example, there are currently in the United States, a country of, 340 million people, 100 million of those people living in or near poverty. The last 3 years have seen a decline in the life expectancy in the first time in the nation's history. If there's not a more clear metric that we need to know that the current political economy that we're using is not working, I don't know what else you can use.
Yeah, I mean, specifically to that, to take that phrase I said before about, like, communism exists, it's just for a small amount of people. The resources also exist to give it to everybody. Like, it does already exist. It's just being deliberately withheld by these people who mostly all know each other, are incredibly, deeply perverted and weird and horrible. And even though they might have various fights with each other, obviously over their vast accumulated wealth, like Chris was saying, at the end of the day, they do just share each other's interests, which is why they go in for that kind of conspiracy. And it makes sense, right? Like, it's the power structure trying to preserve itself. What is, I think, personally really troubling about that is that, like, maybe I have a limited imagination, but I could imagine if I had, like, $500,000, that would be, like, the greatest extent of any weird thing I'd ever want to do.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, I think with that amount of money in the current system we have, I could probably do everything that was of interest of me. Right? So, these motherfuckers have billions! Like, what are they doing with it? Why do they need it? You know, it has to be some kind of weird numbers game, or it's just a power relationship at that point. It has nothing to do with you know, money.
I'm sure we'll do an episode that devoted to Warren Buffett, but guys like him are the actual most terrifying because, you know, he says like, well, you know, I've been living in the same house since 1970 right. And it's fine for me, and there's just really nothing wrong with it. It's just good. And
that's even more psychotic.
What are you doing? With the billions that you should be having Snoopy engraved on the moon or something. Like something that would be more creative than that. That's what's terrifying, is that it truly must be some sort of hoarding psychosis, that it's literally not about his creature comforts or physical material benefits. He literally just has a psychotic drive to hoard as much of worker produced surplus as possible.
Well, I think with a guy like that, you know, and also I think that Sam Walton, who we'll obviously get into, is very much in the same sort of vein. They sort of have, even with that vast amount of wealth, this weird, like, pathology. They want to appear working class in some sort of way. Like, when you talk about Sam Walton and his, like, fucking, like, every fucking thing I read about Sam Walton always mentioned his fucking beat-up old pickup truck. Like, or like the Waltons corporate headquarters being in some fucking little town like Bensonville, Arkansas, you know what I mean, in this little, you know, heart of this downtown.
Yeah, it's such a phony construction there, right? Because again, it's like you don't get to earn that unless you don't get to earn that badge of like legitimate, you know, I'm just a regular guy if you own the world.
I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else.
And again, towards the particular psychological element to it, the thing that is so weird to me again about those guys who clearly it's just a fucking abacus that they're shifting the pieces around because they're not really doing anything extravagant with their lifestyle. The metaphor it always makes me think about is, this is gonna be stupid, but the first time I saw the Hobbit movies, and I didn't watch all of them, but when you got to the second one, and you know, there's this dragon hoarding this huge amount of gold in this cave. And I remember thinking, like, why the fuck does the dragon want the gold? He doesn't do anything with it. He literally just sits around asleep waiting for dwarves to try and take it back. Like, he doesn't do anything with it. And that's what I think about with these guys, where they're just these weird dragons sitting on this mountain of bullshit. And I never watched the third movie. I don't know what happens, and I don't care to. Nobody ever explained it to me. But, you know, I hope the dragon gets murdered and all of the gold gets just thrown to the rest of the people.
Surely, since art imitates life, surely that was based off of the same kind of a billionaire, right? Like, since modern literature has been around, like, there have been those fat cats, robber barons, whatever.
I just want to be clear, because you've said the word literature. I have not read the Hobbit book, and I'm not going to. I only saw...
I didn't read it as a child. I'm sure as shit not going to read it now.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think I'm just gonna wing it here. I don't know fucking when J.R.R. Tolkien grew up, but I'm assuming it was, you know, in the early 20th century. So I'm guessing that sort of maybe if he had a sort of childhood growing up in, you know, the first Gilded Age, you know what I mean? Maybe the literature that he wrote, you know, sort of like what you were saying, how that fucking dragon sitting on the big fucking cave full of gold, you know, maybe that can color our understanding of the second Gilded Age. What I like to call what we're living in now, the woke Gilded Age. That's what I like to call it. It's all of the same filthy excess and greed, except, now we have woke capitalism to go along with it.
Now when I was a young boy, about the age of 5, my teachers told me I could be the greatest man alive. They told me I could change the world, be whatever I wanted to be. There was no one in the world like me. Every one of us was so unique. I'd not be an average man. No, sir, I'd be no average man.
Again, with this podcast, what we want to do is take a deep dive into specific people and look at them, and I think even just for us as researchers or whatever, like learning about these names that literally dominate our lives and dominate American culture, but we don't actually know too much about them, with the few exceptions of maybe a couple of very bullshitty propagandistic tales about, I pulled up my own bootstraps and now I own the world or whatever. And so we're talking, of course, about the Waltons, the richest family in America. I'm going to go ahead and give my own editorial note. Maybe the worst family in America.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's saying a lot.
Like, I'm including my own family in that. Like, the Waltons fucking suck.
Yeah, I've got actually a nice little segue, a paragraph from a 2004 Fortune article that was actually a treasure trove of a lot of propaganda. I don't know any other way to put it. Like, a very much Bush years propaganda on the billionaires, which I want to get into. But let me read this first paragraph here. I don't know. I want to read it in like a Sam Elliott voice. Most of us are familiar with Mr. Sam. Most of us are familiar with Mr. Sam. That is Samuel Moore Walton, Walmart Stores founder. Born in 1918 in the dusty community of Kingfisher, Oklahoma, he had accumulated the biggest family fortune in America by the time he died in 1992. Gone too soon. Today, Mr. Sam...
Prayers up. Prayers up for Sam Walton.
Today, Mr. Sam still looms over his clan, starting with the fact that its vast wealth is the product not just of his business acumen, but also of his foresight.
Can I jump in really quick? Just as immediate reaction. That first line, where like he grew up in a dusty community, it's always dust. These motherfuckers are always dusty, scrappy. I think because of the Dust Bowl. And so in my mind, I'm just going to imagine Sam as a child just fucking covered in dust for the rest of his life.
Well, the first thing, when we first decided we were going to do this, the first thing I did was I looked up on YouTube and I found this, I guess it was AMC or fucking Biography, one of those channels had this like just absolutely hagiographic fucking documentary about Sam Walton. You know what I mean? And like one of the things they mentioned, and it's driven home constantly every time Sam Walton is mentioned in any of this propaganda, is this growing up in the Dust Bowl and this rough and tumble existence as a child during the Great Depression. But what is very rarely really, what is conveniently left out of that is that, okay, yeah, he did grow up in the Dust Bowl during the Great Depression. That doesn't mean he grew up poor. He grew up very comfortable, and he grew up very comfortable because his father, made, his living working for the bank, evicting fucking families, from their homesteads, who went under.
Yeah, he was like a repo guy.
Yeah, exactly.
He was like a bank repossessor. Exactly.
Although what made me fucking just boiling mad was watching this, and they're talking about this as they're playing this fucking Woody Guthrie song over top of them narrating this. Like, what? Could you imagine what Woody fucking Guthrie would think about this? Like his song being used. Like, this is the fucking, like, these are the villains of the songs the motherfucker wrote. Like, yeah, this
exactly.
is like, yeah, like you're supposed to think of fucking, like, when you hear about Sam Walton and they talk about him in the Dust Bowl, they expect you to think about fucking like Tom Joad, but you know what I mean? Or like they think about the fucking Grapes of Wrath, but he was the fucking, his family was the fucking, would have been the villains in that world, There
was I think we watched the same thing, because there's a moment in that documentary where they have like an interview with some biographer of him or something, and they're doing it in this Ken Burns style where like when the guy is talking, they have all these like super superimpose photographs of, you know, sad Depression era families who are, again, being repossessed by Sam Walton's dad.
Yeah.
And the line that the guy said that, like, made me almost break my fucking keyboard in two was, because they're building it up like this is biography, this is his background. And so I think, okay, this is corporate propaganda. They're gonna say this is, you know, this world influenced him in a positive way. And the line that the guy says is, you know, having come around with his dad to all of the farms that his dad was repossessing, he saw the poor families, and he thought to himself, I'm not gonna grow up poor. I'm never gonna be poor. Not, hey, maybe my dad is a total piece of shit. Or, like, maybe I should use my grit and who-dickery or whatever to, like, fucking help other people. It was just like, look at these pieces of shit. Like, I don't want to be like them.
Put it this way. When Sam Walton died, this is literally, I'm sorry, this is how Fortune is opening up this article and biography about this family. So, okay, put it this way. When Sam Walton died, it was hardly a taxable event. Sam had set up... I'm sorry. Sam had set up his ownership of Walmart stock in a family partnership that largely avoided estate taxes. So at the time of Walton's death, each of his 4 children held 20% of Walton Enterprises. While Sam owned 10, as did his wife Helen, she inherited his partnership stake tax-free.
Oh my God.
Isn't that sweet? That's inspiring. It's inspiring, really.
Isn't that just a magnanimous guy? If that doesn't illustrate the point that, like, the ruling class feels absolute zero responsibility to the people that created their fortune, like zero reflection that they drove no trucks, they drove no container gantries in ports that loaded goods to be sold in Walmarts. They're not engineers.
Except the ones that contained repossessed farms. Those were the only trucks they were driving.
Exactly.
Well, I think the other thing I think that it's worth noting is that, you know, we hear a lot about, you know, in addition to this sort of like pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, we sort of have this mythology, like they talk about a lot, you hear about it with Jeff Bezos and Amazon and how he fucking supposedly started it in his fucking garage, and then leaving out the part that he started it in his garage with, what, a $300,000 fucking loan from his parents. So, you know, digging back into, you know, Sam Walton, you know, his wife, he married the daughter of a very wealthy man, and Sam Walton started his first store in, I believe, 1945 with a $20,000 loan from her father. This is $20,000.
Yeah, he got a loan from his daddy-in-law.
$20,000 in 1945 money, which I believe is about $275,000, you know, today, adjusted for inflation or something like that.
A small loan of $1 million.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I don't fucking have anybody that could lend me $275,000 to pull myself up by my own bootstraps. Do you?
No, of course not. And as well to that, like the whole thing that you were just saying, the way that they were framing it about, like, all this reverence about, like, oh, his business acumen. His idea was literally just cheaper prices. That's not a fucking genius idea.
Inspiring.
Well, there was another interview, I believe, and it's been a while since I watched it now, but in that documentary where they were interviewing, I don't know if you remember this part, Shane, where they were interviewing the guy, I guess, who owned the store across the street from Sam Walton's first store. I guess the first, you know, small business owner of many that Sam would drive out of business. But they interviewed him, and the way he was talking about it is like, oh, I guess, you know, he was just more vicious than I was, you know, and they're even spinning that as if that's some sort of, you know, it's something to be held up as an example of his tremendous business acumen.
It's so opaquely, like, not frontier, like you wouldn't just go, well, oh shucks, he was more vicious than me. I guess me and my family are gonna go take off and die then.
Yeah. That's something you say about the man that's stabbing you down.
Right.
Like, well, I guess he was more vicious than I was.
Well, he's a vicious so-and-so, isn't he? So that's good old Daddy Walton there.
And luckily he died. I mean, again, the unfortunate part of it is that none of his wealth was at all redistributed or repurposed in any meaningful way. It all went to his wife and then his shitty
children.
Shitty children. So he did have 4 kids. One of them already is dead. I don't remember the dead ones because I don't remember losers.
Yeah. Get him out of here. Get him the hell out of here.
You're dead, bitch. Like, not interesting to me anymore. But he's got a couple of surviving ones, and I'm going to see if I can remember them off the top of my head without looking. So there's Jim Bob, Robson, and Alice.
He couldn't have bought better names.
Before we get any farther into the Jim Bob thing, his name is actually Jim. I just made up Jim Bob.
Oh, okay, all right.
But if we can call him Jim Bob.
No, he's Jim. He's always going to be Jim Bob.
For the purposes of, if the other one gets to be called fucking Robson. Yeah, we're naming this one Jim Bob. Robson, is not a joke. His name is fucking Robson.
Is that like a contraction of anything, or is it just literally Robson?
That is Sam's wife's maiden name.
They named the kid after after her last name?
They named the kid after her incredibly wealthy father, of course. That's how these things work, Shane.
Oh my god, that's so fucking weird. It's such a weird thing to do.
So Robson here, he is the chairman of the board of Walmart. He has an enormous net worth. He personally has a net worth of $47 billion.
They all have about in that range, because it's mostly inherited.
Imagine inheriting, and this is true, a net worth individually more than the GDP of Bahrain. So just a few lines, a few excerpts about Robson from this profile of the Walton family that I want to call out here. Here's one that reads: because they hold such a huge stake in Walmart, the Waltons have a large, if quiet, influence on our economy and society. The Waltons' decisions could also affect hundreds of billions of dollars in investors' stock portfolios and retirement accounts. What the family does with its great wealth, think Rockefellers again for a moment, could leave a lasting mark on the nation.
I mean, it has. It definitely fucking has.
With them especially, and with any of the people that we talk about here, to break down the idea of meritocracy, that these individuals hold more influence as people as any of the members of the working class.
One family controls more than the wealth than 43% of the rest of the country, right? I mean, it's so absurd that they literally command in any kind of meaningful way on a production level in terms of purchasing power, like the same as half of the country. 3 people. And they don't do anything with it. Like, again, they're just dragons sitting on this mountain of gold. Like, and maybe, I don't know what all of their kinks are. Some of these are going to be new. I do want to hear about Robson.
That's the thing that's interesting that I've discovered, in trying to research these guys a little bit, is that there's not that much out there. Like, what the fuck are they doing? compared to like a Warren Buffett or an Elon Musk or a Bill Gates type that is just, they're out so public. You know what I mean? Like, this family is so just generally as a group secretive, especially Jim, who we'll get into, who was not even interviewed for this fucking Fortune propaganda article you sent us.
I mean, think about it, too. They have the resources to have access to literal state-level counterintelligence.
Yeah, right. I mean, they could make their own country. I mean, in a certain way, you could argue that they've taken over this one, right?
Yes.
But, like, with that kind of wealth, it's absolutely unchallengeable, anything they do.
There's one thing out of this article that really got to me, and I may go on a bit of a diatribe here, but this is a quote from...
By all means.
Go off.
A quote from Robson saying, "I worked in my dad's stores, moving boxes. I remember quite well one stockroom that was upstairs.
Right, I remember this.
Sweeping floors, laying tile. I also had paper routes." So I gave this is something that I've experienced before in my life, the idea of like Tommy Boy, right? Like the idea of these rich kids starting from the bottom. Like it's they're the rich parent that has some inkling to say that this kid of mine is gonna inherit an enormous amount of money, and I know that they have the awareness to think like they're gonna be a crap kid and a crap adult if they don't learn humility, hard work, value of the dollar, those like buzzwords that we think about, solidarity with shop workers, whatever. But even if you are elbow to elbow with people in a factory, let's just say, or in a store like Robson was here, you are the boss's kid. And there are like 2 things that differentiate you from everybody else. You will never be treated as a colleague because they know that you hold economic power over them. And on the off chance that that they say something to you or off color or whatever, and you took it the wrong way, and you tell the boss, them and their family's livelihood could be taken away because of some petty crap. And B, you, unlike them, will never know the feeling of not having a safety net. Because if you do well, like if you sweep real good and you deliver those papers, whatever, in your dad's store or whatever, you're going to be a billionaire. And if you screw up, you're going to be a billionaire. The working class programming is like inside of you when you're born. You'll never, ever get rid of that. But if you grow up as a member of the ruling class, there's absolutely no way that you can't be some psychotic Fauntleroy.
I mean, it's in that specific circumstance, this is another big thing that weird rich people do, is that like kind of working class LARPing shit, where it's where they're like
fucking Donald Trump Jr. in The Hunting.
Right, exactly. Or again, in a circumstance like that where it's like, one summer I had to work a job at my dad's store. I get it. And it's like, no, you don't, motherfucker. He was your dad. He's not gonna fire you.
Well, it's also worth noting that when Robson talks about delivering the newspapers, he was also working for his dad because his dad also owned the local newspaper. So,
exactly.
So that's worth noting as well. That wasn't like some enterprising thing he went out and did on his own.
Like any one of the people that he worked next to can lose their position on Maslow's hierarchy in like the blink of an eye. That kid would never has no idea what that's like. The thing about the children of billionaires or whatever, the only labor that they have is to curry favor with their parents.
Right, exactly. It's more in that sense like social or emotional labor, right? Which again it's not even applicable to a certain extent to call it labor, because the things that they're doing are not materially determinate. It's like like you were saying, like it doesn't matter how well they do the job or not, because the whole pretense of having that fucking job is like to get daddy's approval. It has nothing to do with actually surviving.
Well, also, what I'm thinking about too, as you're talking about this, is so like think about Robson fucking working at his dad's store in the 50s or 60s or whenever that was. So like if that is the impression that he got of the American working class, and as you said that his perception of it is so tainted by whatever sort of interpersonal relationship he would have had with the other workers in that store in the first place. But like if that is his interaction with the American working class that colored his perception of them for the rest of his life, imagine like today just how much more precarious the situation would even be for somebody who works in a Walmart store than it would have been in Sam Walton's store in the 50s, because
of the shitty guy who did it.
Right.
That's the best part, right? It's because of like I will LARP with a bunch of workers for a couple summers
at a time when we had the fucking residual effects of the New Deal, and we had a stronger social safety net in some respects, and someone working in fucking,
and then I will spend my life to destroy that safety net,
right?
And then like 40 years later pretend that it's the same fucking situation.
Yeah, this was just I'm gonna skip past a few things here. I mean, they talk about, there's just one line where he says, oh yeah, but with real estate and legal and those sorts of areas, this is like one of the other executives talking about him, his knowledge base and ability to drill down is remarkable. He also has a photographic memory. He can tell you about a store that we opened in Paducah, Kentucky, and it's near a Burger King and 3 miles from the interstate, and that why Kmart has a slightly better location. I'm like, basic recall and object permanence entitles him to the GDP of Bahrain.
Yeah.
I got a pretty good memory too, dude. Where's my fucking billions?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know where the good Popeyes is versus the bad Popeyes.
I can tell you why I would rather fucking go to the gas station that's on the right on my way into work than the one that I have to cross oncoming traffic to on the left. Like I could tell you those things too. Why one store is more likely to do better one time a day or whatever.
Another thing from that Fortune magazine is like, Robson did not drown himself by turning his head up in the rain. What a brilliant fucking guy he was. He never did that. Smart kid.
The last part that I want to read from this is stunning. It says, one other thing about Rob Walton's office. It's about the size of a large supply closet, 10 feet by 10 feet, he says proudly, with no windows. All of the offices at Walmart are small, but Rob's is smaller than most of the other senior executives for 2 reasons. First, it sends the message that even Mr. Sam's son doesn't get preferential treatment. Second, Rob isn't in the office that much these days, only 4 or 5 times a month. From his home in the Colorado mountains, Rob will take off in his jet to go cycling in France, or hunt geese in Canada, or go on bio safaris in South America.
Yeah. Of course, the son of Sam does not... First of all, son of Sam. He's the son of Sam. But, like, the son of Sam is not going to get preferential treatment. He's going to get billions of dollars!
Well, you guys are being very unfair because what that article didn't mention is that the other people in that office, Rob's fucking mansion in Colorado and his jets are smaller than their mansions and their jets as well.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I thought it was so weird, like, this article came out in 2004, and I was thinking about, like, why I was just remembering, like, in 2004 how there was definitely like a cultural virtue placed on understatement of wealth, and I was thinking about, like, the Bush years. Like, yeah, of course, there is maybe no more of an erudite, rich, gilded family than the Bushes in America, and yet for a guy, George W. Bush, that went to Yale and Phillips, whatever, the Andover, Exeter, whatever, and yet he was a guy that you wanted to have a beer with?
Right. Again, that's the LARPy shit. That's like it's a total, like, fabrication based upon some weird personal aesthetic choices. It's like, I wear leather boots because I'm a real cowboy, even though that leather is, like, stripped off of live those Japanese beef cows that they raise, like, whatever.
Kobe.
Like,
Harvested from the most dangerous game I play on my island.
Yeah. My island of fucking rare exotic animals, like I'm a Roman emperor holding a triumph. Robson canceled.
Yeah, let's talk about Jim. So, yeah, he fucking sucks. Look at a picture of him, man. I'm looking at this picture of him, and, like, it's like, I don't know, he reminds me sort of like Jim Broadbent, the actor, except he's got more hair, like, I don't know, but he's got this weird, like, I get very televangelist vibes from him, or, like, fucking, like, weird assistant principal from middle school vibes. But no, so Jim he's referred to, I guess, in this propaganda article as the quiet one. You always got to watch out for the guy in the bar that, like, as the night goes on, he drinks more and more, he just gets quieter and quieter. He's just fucking seething. But no, Jim was the one that was not interviewed for this article, and Jim was the one that was kind of hard to find much about. But he did not originally sit on the board at Walmart. He only, I guess, joined the board of Walmart when John, rest in piss, died, I guess, in 2005. That was the brother that we're not even going to get into because who cares?
Loser. Total loser.
Right, yeah. I prefer my billionaires to be alive.
Yeah.
But no, so Jim has always been more of he's been the real estate arm of the family business. Because here's the thing that I guess really to really consider about the Waltons, the more I looked into them, they're sort of like, man, they've got their fucking grimy little fingers in everything. They've got it in politics. In addition to when it's easy to overlook if you just associate them with the Walmart stores, but they've got their fucking fingers in real estate and in banking and in politics and in education and all sorts of stuff. And Jim is the one so Jim sits on the board of Arvest Bank, which is the largest bank in Arkansas. And I want to turn back to, in this article, I think this is a really interesting little look at, okay, so here it is. Walk into an Arvest branch, and it feels as though you're in a Walmart version of a bank.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Was it because all of the tellers are on government assistance?
Right. Yeah. I would like to know what the tellers in the bank make as compared to a regular bank. There are lots of friendly signs about, and officers and tellers sport oversized badges with their first names in big letters. Arvest's financial performance is just average, though, according to consulting firm S&L Financial. And I guess the other thing from this article here, and this really gives you a sort of a look into the impact that the Walton family has specifically on this community and on this part of Arkansas, and it's very chilling. So I'll read this here. He also owns, like I said earlier, that Sam owned the local newspaper when he was alive, and Jim is the one that took control of that. So besides getting into banking, Sam Walton decided decades ago to buy the local newspaper, the Benton County Daily Record, which now operates under Walton family corporate parent Community Publishers. While Sam may have been, this is great, yeah, this may have been, really is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. While Sam may have been interested in acquiring a printing press for flyers and brochures, the move also protected the family from a potentially unfriendly press.
Oh.
Yeah, just also happened to do
Yeah,
that.
but this is an unintended, byproduct of fucking buying up the local newspaper. Yeah. Today, Jim owns 97% of Community Publishers. Not long ago, Community Publishers got into a battle with the Stevens clan of Little Rock. There's another incredibly wealthy Arkansas family of investment bankers.
Clan, by the way, in that article is spelled with a K.
Yeah. Very, very likely. Yeah. Over a newspaper in Fayetteville, the Northwest Arkansas Times. The Stevensons, who control another paper in the region, tried to buy the Times, but the U.S. attorney and Community Publishers sued and blocked the deal. Conrad Black's Hollinger International bought the paper and later sold it to Jim's company. Now, here's the part that I found really chilling. Consider for a moment the power that Walmart and the Walton family hold in the northwest corner of their state. It's not unlikely that an individual works at Walmart, owns Walmart stock in his 401k, banks, and has his mortgage at Jim Walton's Arvis Bank, gets his news from the Benton County Daily Record, and perhaps even has a subscription to the Walton Arts Center. While a few people have complained about this concentration of power, generally, the populace has no objections.
It's like a fucking old-timey company town.
I know, it really is.
But writ large, it's like a whole state.
Right. And I wonder how many fucking members of the local community they interviewed for this article and to prove that they have no objections about it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I walked around North Korea under supervised
Exactly.
and everybody there said they actually do really love the supreme leader.
Right. It goes on to say, and because of the Walton success in business and that of people like Tyson and Hunt, Bentonville and the surrounding towns and counties are growing so fast that most folks are just too busy to care.
Oh, that enrages me.
Wow.
Oh, that makes me so mad.
The idea of the Walton Family Art Center is actually really messed up. Let's say that they bring some, incredible priceless pieces of art to northwestern Arkansas, which is great.
Right. Annual showings of Glenn Beck's The Christmas Sweater.
So you, as an indentured servant to the Walmart Corporation, get to go into this museum and look at these artifacts that are wildly expensive and something that you'll never be able to own, and you're just looking at the property of this unbelievably wealthy family.
Yeah, right. It's sort of like just a weird display of wealth.
Well, it's also, I think for them, it's sort of like for a wealthy family like them, any sort of philanthropy like that is sort of like the modern equivalent of fucking buying indulgences from the church.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Just buying look at this wonderful thing that look at these fucking millions of dollars I spent on my community to fucking, and I invite the fucking unwashed masses in their fucking potato sacks to gaze upon these wonders, and what a great benefactor I am to them.
I just wait again on the fucking the Walton family art center thing. I'm just imagining them in our age what that would be, and it would just be a bunch of fucking weird pilgriming chuds on one of those airport non-escalators, those flat things, and they're just going by Ben Garrison cartoons. As they go from entry point to exit way, and when they get out, a fucking Gestapo agent just puts them in a cage for a minute. That's the Walton Family Art Center. Enjoy, you plebs.
So here's the other interesting thing I found about Jim Walton that I think is funny is that he's also sort of in the seems to be one of the bigger contributors to various politicians.
Oh, I think I know what this might be.
So
I think I know what this one might be.
I sure hope so, because it's good. I'm going to get to the good one in a second, but first I want to mention that, so obviously most of his contributions go to Republicans. I think it's worth noting that the only two Democrats I could find that he contributed to were friend of the show, Hillary Clinton, and Democratic Senator from Arkansas, Blanche Lincoln, who I found an interesting little anecdote.
Is that a United States senator or
that is a United States senator from, I believe, 1999 to 2000, I guess, 98 to 2000.
Wait, hold on. That's not a real name.
I've got an even less real-sounding name in a second that we'll get into. That's going to be the fun one. But no, so Blanche Lincoln, one of the things I found out about her is that, so this is picture 2000 2010, the aftermath of the financial crisis.
The financial crisis that we know and love.
Of course, yeah. So one of the things that there was a minor scandal where Blanche Lincoln was pushed for an increase to an asset threshold in the financial regulations bill that they were trying to pass through Congress, and she basically tweaked it or added something in such a way that would have exempted Arvest Bank, which is the one that Jim Walton owns, from a provision that would have basically saved them $115 million, an exemption that only would have benefited Arvest Bank. And so that is one of the people that I'm sure that, the money, the vast amounts of money that Jim Walton donated to her had absolutely nothing to do with that. But let's get to the fun one. So the really fun one I found, and there's just no way this is not a real name. This guy's name is, I think it's Loy Moch.
Loy Moch?
Loy Moch?
Loy Moch.
So what this
Was that a typo? Were they forgetting a letter?
No, the first thing I thought of when I saw this name, have you ever seen that screenshot of like that Japanese baseball game, like the Nintendo game for like the early 90s or something, where like they've got the list of like what they thought would be American sounding names? Like, so it's Loy, like Roy, but with an L, Loy,
yeah.
And then his last name is Mauch. This is another one of Jim's beauties. One of the politicians that this is an Arkansas state representative, an admitted member of a neo-Confederate secessionist group.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, called the League of the South.
The League of the South!
Right, who has said, among other things, I'm sure he said many things that involved many very specific words, but he said that that Obama is a radical Muslim. He said that the Confederate flag is a symbol of, quote, Jesus Christ and biblical government. He compared Lincoln to the Nazis, and he said that he was a war criminal on par with Adolf Hitler. And he said that slavery couldn't possibly be bad because Jesus and Paul didn't condemn it, and the Constitution allowed it. This is where just a small chunk of the vast Walton family fortune is going to fucking snake-handling psychopaths. Like fucking Loy Mauch.
I just want to call that out too. That's interesting. I just learned that in the amendment abolishing slavery specifically calls out, unless you're charged with a crime, then you can work without labor. And that's interesting because the Clintons, when Bill Clinton was governor in Arkansas, they used unpaid prison labor in the governor's mansion.
I've heard about this, yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, in Hillary Clinton's book, she says, "Oh well, don't worry, they were vetted heavily, and if they ever did anything wrong, they would be sent immediately back to prison."
We were never in any danger, don't worry.
Heavy vetting.
So I think that'll wrap up Jim. Yeah, he sucks ass.
Let's talk about Alice.
Yeah, let's talk about Alice. So Alice is the only sister of the group, and her deal seems to be, again, when you do the surface level reading and when I was trying to find out information about her, is a similar kind of story of like, hey, she's actually very modest about literally being a power over most of America. And she's got a gentle heart and all that kind of thing. And the thing that is often stressed in these articles that are these fawning biographies of these people is like, oh, she didn't really go into the family business like the brothers did. Instead, she struck out on her own in finance. So she's obviously not very far from the tree in any kind of meaningful way.
I don't know if striking out on your own is that accurate when you probably have more personal wealth than most financial institutions, like mid-cap financial institutions in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, you got to imagine that she probably had a really hard time getting a job. When she decided, Daddy, instead of working at Walmart, I want to work in banking. I'm sure that was a very difficult move for her. But
how would you even get hired? Like, what's the interview process? Be like, so look, you've got a nice resume here. You've gone, please don't seize my family's property with eminent domain.
Right? Yeah. Please don't repossess my dad's farm. But in any case, in terms of who she is, she's again the weird thing is that like, oh, she's not very vocal or public about who she is, which is actually in a very funny way quite bullshit that we're going to get into. But again, the surface thing is she's in charge of a couple of these different kind of philanthropic art things and those other tendrils of the Walton Foundation that are not necessarily directly involved with the business. I believe she's on the board of Walmart currently, but she doesn't really participate in kind of the grand decision-making thing. I'm sure it's just like a straw man kind of scenario, you know, where she's there to just say whatever that the rest of the family is doing. But interestingly, there is one thing that she really loves, and that's horses. She has a horse farm, a big ranch of her own in Arkansas, and she loves just collecting horses, getting new horses, racing them. And, you know, again, with my own personal interest, I was looking deeply for some kind of pathological reason for that. I could not find one until...
Well, all the rest of them are big into flying airplanes.
Yeah, well, they're...
Poor John there.
Cut his mic.
Poor John there didn't do so well with one.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he missed the landing.
Yeah, it's John Walton, the John McCain of the Walton family.
Johns of a feather crash together. Okay, but so if some of the brothers were interested in flying planes, I would say she was interested in flying cars. And so I'm just gonna read this article in pretty much its entirety. This made me so angry, and it's one of those things where it's like each new piece of information will really get you. So this is, the title of this article is The Untold Story of Alice Walton's DWI Incident.
No way.
Right into my veins.
The real mistake immediately, the immediate mistake of that title is that it's not plural. Because that's where it gets fun. Okay, it was a routine arrest, the kind Texas public safety officers like Trooper Jeffrey Davis make every day.
Jeff Davis?
Yeah, Jefferson Davies.
Jefferson.
But little did Davis know that the woman he had just booked for driving while intoxicated possessed a superhuman power. She wasn't able to walk heel to toe. She couldn't put her index finger to her nose if her eyes were shut. She even had a hard time keeping her head up. In other words, she failed the standardized roadside sobriety test that Davis administered, and she was arrested. Yet she was Alice Walton, heiress to the Walmart fortune, a woman with superhuman power at her disposal, the power to swipe up artistic masterpieces prized around the world and hoard them into backwater Bentonville, Arkansas, the power to keep an international payroll of 3 million people doing your bidding under the boot of poverty. It's the power to fly above the law, and then to crash the plane. Sorry, that's my editorial again. But here's where, prepare yourself to get angry. Davis might have known he hadn't pulled over just anyone. When he informed her the registration on her SUV was expired, she replied, "I have someone who does that for me." So this is sort of detailing this arrest that happened in 2011. It's one of the more recent of hers. The rest of this article gets into her history of doing this, and it really is a history of repeated things. And the more you read this, the more you wonder, okay, if these are the ones that are fairly known about, what has been totally thrown under the bus. So I'm just going to kind of pick and choose a couple of these, again, to give you a sense, if that phrase that she used didn't already, of the entitlement that kind of wealth gives you. This is actually, I believe, her second DWI. So 5 years later, this would be in 1988, while speeding in Fayetteville, Arkansas, she struck and killed Oletta Hardin, a 50-year-old cannery worker.
No, what?
What?
And she never received so much as a ticket.
Stop.
So in 1988, Alice Walton, lover of horses and crasher of planes, just fucking murdered a literal worker. Like, just the most classical idea of a member of the working class, a factory worker. Killed her, and didn't receive anything for it.
Pulling a Laura Bush.
10 years later, in 1998, she got wasted and totaled an SUV in Springdale, Arkansas. "Do you know who I am?" she asked responding officers who charged her with a DWI. "Do you know my last name?" So they did administer a breathalyzer test to her. She was 6 points above the legal limit of alcohol in that state, and her lawyers basically argued, I'm going to just summarize this, they argued that her job was really tough and she was under a lot of stress, And so she received for that $925 fine for that particular one. And at that time, this was before, I believe before Sam died, but her net worth was $6.3 billion.
I was just going to say, like, I don't even have anything funny to say. Like, that is so unbelievable. I just, Jesus. She is the Godzilla of Northwestern Arkansas.
I mean, I think the way that this article puts it in terms of a superhuman power, it's very apt. That's what these fucking people have. They have a perpetual fucking, Under Armour on of just being rich. It's no matter what you do. Like, I mean, once I looked into the fact that she killed somebody, I was like, whoa, they must have covered that up. They didn't even. It's so easy to find. Like,
it just literally doesn't matter.
Yeah, no consequences. Again, they are a fucking dragon sitting on a hoard of gold, and whenever they get bored of being in the cave, they drink a fucking liter of whiskey and just start flying around, crashing into villages, going like, do you know my dad is Smaug?
The point of this is to, explain about the personal lives of the billionaires and how they weaponize capital to keep us under their boot. I think it just bears worth mentioning, just a quick greatest hits of the Walmart Corporation, of what the reason that they are so rich. Just real quick list. About over $6 billion in government assistance go to Walmart employees every year because they don't have health insurance, or they aren't paid enough of a living wage. They are anti-union, violently anti-union. They have predatory pricing. They beat up suppliers. They outcompete and they weaponize their mass to crush competitors. Their work conditions are terrible. They are using undocumented labor and child workers in other countries. They are utilizing the arbitrage of global supply chain and Eastern labor and their relative low wages to subsidize their wealth. Sweatshops, prison labor, and above all, and most importantly, just the unbelievable impact that they have on our climate from production, shipping, and maldisposal of all of their goods. This is an evil entity. If I had if we were put in power, leftists were put in power or something, what would we do with this? Off the top of my head, I don't know, nationalize it?
Absolutely.
For sure.
Break it up.
But then we'd also be left with the question of what to do with the Waltons. Again, they exist. And I would like to go down the list, a few modest proposals.
No, Alice will be like, have you ever seen fucking the first season of Westworld? Like the end of that season of Westworld when he puts the guy on the horse and just like fucking just sends him out into the fucking desert to die of exposure.
Yeah.
And then who else we got? John, unfortunately.
I think he gave himself his own punishment.
He must. We never heard back from his office. We were hoping to have him as a guest, but unfortunately,
he declined comment.
Yeah, transportation issues.
Well, I think that Jim, I guess since Jim is the quiet one, and Jim is the one that declined to be interviewed and seems to be the one that least likes to deal with the public, I guess he has to be now until fucking the end of eternity. He has to work as a greeter in one of his Walmart stores.
Yes. Yes!
He's allowed one 15-minute break per 12-hour shift, and anything outside of that, Jim Bob, I'm sorry, bro. You gotta piss. Here's a Gatorade bottle. You gotta piss in the Gatorade bottle.
I wish we could just keep them in like the stocks in like a Dickensian British village or something. Just like somebody coming up, like a gang, like the freaking ultraviolence from Clockwork Orange, and just like kicking them in the ass and being like, all right, are you sitting in the stocks, right?
Yeah. Just roaming bands of industrial era like Cockney orphans running around.
I got a load of this, chap. Yeah, he's sitting in the stocks, isn't he?
Just Dickensian street urchins.
Yeah.
Just throwing tomatoes at them.
Yeah.
I bet he's got a lot of coins in his pocket.
Oh, shit.
Eat the rich.
As Bernie Sanders said, though, I don't think they taste very good.
I don't think they taste very good.
Saute them gently in some great value olive oil.
Great value olive oil bought as a gallon drum at Walmart. with no like filter top. You just rip open the top of the drum and douse yourself.
That's it.
Anyway, that might be it from us, folks. Tune in next time